Day 557 of the Trump administration, 99 days now until the midterm elections, and this might go down as the day we witnessed a change resulting in the new defense strategy on the part of the Trump team. It's about something Rudolph Giuliani has started to say, and tonight Mark Mazzetti of the New York Times has put it this way, quote, "In the days after the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump's advisors had an unequivocal message about contacts between Russians and members of the campaign team. There were none. In the ensuing months, as numerous such communications were revealed, the message changed. There was no collusion with Russia's effort to disrupt the election." On Monday, President Trump's lawyer, Rudolph Giuliani, consistently presented a third line of defense. Even if Mr. Trump did collude with the Russians, he committed no crime. "My client didn't do it, and even if he did it, it's not a crime," he said on Fox News. "Hacking is the crime. The president didn't hack. He didn't pay for the hacking," he said on CNN. The article goes on. "It's just a word choice," said Julie O'Sullivan, a criminal law professor at Georgetown. "I'm sure nobody in the Justice Department has ever investigated collusion, but they've certainly investigated conspiracy. And Rudy," she said of Mr. Trump's lawyer, a former associate attorney general and U.S. attorney in Manhattan, "knows better." For the record, the president has said collusion on Twitter 94 times. Giuliani has been giving interviews throughout the day. Here is what he actually said.
"I've been sitting here looking in the federal code trying to find collusion as a crime."
It's not.
Collusion is not a crime.
I don't even know if that's a crime, colluding about Russians.
Okay.
You start analyzing the crime. The hacking is the crime.
Giuliani also weighed in on the Trump Tower June 2016 meeting. This gets complicated. You may recall our reporting that sources say Michael Cohen is prepared to tell the story to Robert Mueller, that Donald Trump knew about the meeting before it happened.
He did not participate in any meeting about the Russia transaction.
The president.
The president did not.
In this Russian meeting, I'm happy to tell him he wasn't there. He wasn't at the meeting.
The meeting with the Russians, how can you be sure that the president didn't know beforehand? You're saying it's just a he said, he said.
Nobody can be sure of anything.
Earlier this evening, a longtime former Trump Organization employee said this about the possibility of such a meeting occurring without Trump's knowledge.
Based on my experience with working with Trump and everybody that worked for Trump, something major, something newsworthy, something press-worthy would always go before Trump, always. I think that he would have told Donald about the meeting, and then if it didn't amount to anything, it would have been fine.
Giuliani also added to the controversy around Cohen's allegations. He said he heard reports that Michael Cohen is alleging that top-level campaign staff met to discuss Russian help before the infamous meeting with the Russians at Trump Tower. Yet at the same time, Giuliani revealed the news of an alleged second meeting. He simultaneously denied that it ever took place.
There wasn't another meeting that has been leaked but hasn't been public yet.
Okay.
That was a meeting, an alleged meeting, 3 days before. According to Cohen, he says there was a meeting with Donald Jr., with Jared Kushner, with Paul Manafort, with Gates, and possibly two others, in which they, out of the presence of the president, discussed the meeting with the Russians. We checked with their lawyers, the ones we could check with, which were 4 of the 6. That meeting never, ever took place. It didn't happen. It's a figment of his imagination or his lying.
Giuliani's last comment there, referring to Cohen, quote, lying, is part of his evolution on the president's former personal attorney. Just a few months ago, Giuliani called Cohen an honest, honorable lawyer. By last week, however, he had switched to calling Cohen a pathological liar, a man who's been lying for years. Finally, the president went directly at Robert Mueller over the weekend, as you may have seen, quote, "There is no collusion. The Robert Mueller rigged witch hunt is an illegal scam. And is Robert Mueller ever going to release his conflicts of interest with respect to President Trump, including the fact that we had a very nasty and contentious business relationship? I turned him down to head the FBI one day before his appointment as special counsel, and Comey is his close friend." Well, let's at this point bring in our leadoff panel for a Monday night show. Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press. Ellie Honig is here, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York and former assistant attorney general of the great state of New Jersey, and Anita Kumar, White House correspondent for McClatchy Newspapers. Mr. Lemire, are we, in fact, watching, as has been theorized, an evolving policy? No collusion, no collusion, no collusion. If there was, it sure isn't a crime.
Rudy Giuliani, by title, is the president's lawyer, but really we shouldn't be thinking of him doing this in legal terms. He's all about the public relations battle. He is the attack dog that is filling the airwaves, sometimes confusingly. But this does seem like a deliberate step that we have seen, as you just traced there, since 2016. This meeting, these collusion, there was no collusion. No collusion. The president's mentioned that a few times. And yet suddenly today we have Giuliani trotting on a new line suggesting that, well, even if there were collusion, that's not a problem, because it didn't get anywhere. Nothing happened. It's not illegal. Now, I think that I'll defer to my legal colleagues on the set to tell us.
About to.
Okay, I figured you anticipated that in terms of whether that's actually true. But I think what we're seeing from Giuliani here is two things that happened today. And then, of course, he gives us this mysterious other Trump Tower meeting that people in the White House are scratching their heads about. And people I've talked to today don't really know what he's talking about. And they're certainly frustrated. These are close to Trump advisors, both inside and outside the West Wing, who wonder what exactly Giuliani was doing there. Was he trying to get ahead of a story, which is what he said in an interview tonight with the Daily Beast, that he was trying to, there was a report coming, and he was trying to get ahead of it. But they feel like this feels like an unforced error. It was very reminiscent to me of his first interview with Sean Hannity, when suddenly he launched into new revelations about the Stormy Daniels payments that took Hannity by surprise, and we know he's someone who talks to the president quite frequently, and sent the White House into a tailspin trying to figure out what exactly he meant. Giuliani eventually had to walk that back. We're seeing it again here. As much as the president likes him out there, he likes him muddying the waters. It's his answer to Michael Cohen, or now Lanny Davis speaking for Michael Cohen, certainly Michael Avenatti. He wants someone out there to sort of muddy the waters. We've seen Mueller's approval rating drop. Giuliani has been effective there. But this one around people close to the president just wonder what he was doing. And it's raised concerns again whether Giuliani is too often out ahead of his skis and is causing more trouble than he's helping.
So, Counselor, as the former Fed here at the table, how do the Feds view the day that Rudy Giuliani had and all that he said on television?
Yeah, so, Brian, I think as a prosecutor, I'm seeing this, and what I'm seeing is a little bit of panic from the president and from Rudy Giuliani. And I've seen it before. When a defendant and a defense team starts to feel the facts and the evidence closing in on them, and they're feeling like there's nowhere else to go, you see this sort of change in tone that Jonathan referenced. And what's been happening over the last 2 weeks? We're learning more and more every day about what Michael Cohen knows. We heard the tape from Michael Cohen. We know that the Southern District has now subpoenaed the longtime accountant, Weisselberg. Very soon, we're going to start hearing all the witnesses in the Manafort case, including Rick Gates, who apparently was at this meeting. So you can see the panic setting in. And there's a couple. The big tell here is when they lashed out at the Mueller team. And this is right out of defense lawyering.
It's personal.
It's personal. And you know what? It's nothing new. It's in the desperate defense lawyer's playbook. When everything's coming up against you, try to put the prosecution on trial. I've had it done to me. Everyone who's been a prosecutor has had it done to them. It's a sure sign that you're onto something, and it's a sure sign that they're running out of options. So when you see the president lash out at Mueller and the team, know that that's coming. I believe that's coming from a point of weakness and a point of panic. And as Jonathan pointed out, when people panic, they start self-defeating. And some of the things that Rudy Giuliani sort of unexpectedly said today and then walked back are really problematic for the president.
So, Anita, let's go to you because you're the closest to this. The view up here in New York, as you've heard, is that it was a day of confusion at minimum. Is anyone of the view that it's helpful?
Well, maybe the president, I don't know. If the president didn't think that Rudy Giuliani was the right guy to be out there, he probably wouldn't be out there. But, you know, what you all said before is exactly right. I have people that are close to the White House, Republicans, who are scratching their head and saying this is not helpful, and the White House saying they're not really sure what's going on. But remember, this is exactly what happened last time that Jonathan referenced. The White House said on the Stormy Daniels issue that Rudy Giuliani had two different versions about, that they didn't know what was going on with that either. So if this is a strategy, it's one that very few people know about. They're not giving a heads up to anyone. But, you know, remember, Rudy Giuliani, I'll just go back to what I first said, is out there. He's brash. He's aggressive. He's doing all these interviews because the president wants him to.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.